I found myself dressed as the notorious ex-wife of a big shot from a romance novel after a car accident. Quickly realizing the tragic fate of the original wife, I promptly signed my name on the divorce agreement. The CEO's face turned dark. "Amy, have you really thought this through?" I was taken aback, clutching my purse tightly. Kidding, with the exorbitant divorce settlement, I wasn't planning on giving back a single penny. After lying in the hospital bed for 3 days, I finally accepted the reality of crossing worlds. I, Amy, a regular college girl, became the malicious supporting female character in a romance novel. I was the ex-wife of the CEO, using my family's wealth and power to do as I pleased. I met the male lead, Jackson, at the college opening ceremony and became obsessed with him, using all means to pressure him into marrying me. Jackson, the typical campus male lead, handsome and talented, came from humble beginnings. His father was deaf-mute, and his mother had uremia. To raise money for his mother's medical expenses, he compromised and married me. Over 5 years of marriage, Jackson transformed from a nondescript employee to a rising star in the business world. However, our relationship deteriorated over time. As Jackson distanced himself from my control, I, oblivious, continued to be daring and reckless until I pushed his love interest down the stairs, breaking her leg. Finally fed up, Jackson requested a divorce. That's when the car accident happened to me. When Jackson came to see me on the 3rd day, he threw the divorce agreement at me. "Amy, have you had enough?" His voice was cold, his expression showing impatience and disgust. Even so, seeing his face clearly, my heart still skipped a beat. No wonder the original host went crazy over this handsome face. Glancing at the divorce agreement and seeing the substantial amount I would receive, my heart nearly stopped. The original host's family was wealthy, but she had a younger brother who would inherit the company, leaving her with nothing. In just a few years, Jackson had built a considerable fortune from scratch. The divorce settlement was astonishing. I, who had lived virtuously all my life, deserved such a windfall. Calculating what I would receive, I suppressed my excitement, lowered my head in silence, afraid that my smile might give away my thoughts to Jackson. Then, I took a deep breath. Fine, I agree to the divorce. Jackson was taken aback. Perhaps he didn't expect me to agree so readily. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, before he could react, I quickly signed my name on the divorce agreement. Jackson seemed to sense something amiss, furrowing his brow. "You." Turning my head away, I wiped away imaginary tears from my eyes, speaking softly and lifelessly, "I've figured it out, Jackson. Let's move on from each other." It became quiet behind me for a while. It wasn't until I was about to count the money in bed again that I realized Jackson was silently looking at the divorce agreement without moving. Curiously, I asked, "Aren't you leaving yet?" Jackson looked up. I cautiously suggested, Molly's leg isn't healed yet. Shouldn't you go check on her more?" Jackson's expression suddenly darkened. Feeling a bit nervous, I worried that he might regret giving me so much money. But my name was already signed, and he couldn't go back on it. Considering my current agreeable demeanor, it was only right for him to give me the money. During his college days, Jackson had a crush on a girl named Molly. Unlike the arrogant and spoiled lady like me, Molly was beautiful, gentle, sensible, and classy. She came from a single-parent family with modest living conditions, but she was determined and excelled in every way. In a sense, she and Jackson were compatible, and only she truly understood him, being his soulmate. If it weren't for me, they would have naturally been together and would have fought together after graduating from college, creating a happy family of their own in this city I destroyed everything. In the original story, Amy was insanely jealous of Molly, constantly causing trouble, often finding fault, and even ending up pushing her off the building in a fit of madness. Eventually, Jackson completely despised Amy and broke ties with her. Thinking logically, I understood that by offending both the male and female leads, my fate as this wicked supporting female character would be incredibly tragic. So, while I could, I decided to take the money and run. Jackson eventually stormed out. I patted my chest, smirked internally, thinking his temper was quite something. But the thought of the wealth I would receive made me happy again, and I couldn't wait to go shopping online for various items after leaving the hospital. Just as I was thinking about it, I suddenly received a message on my phone from Evan. Heard that Jackson finally mustered the courage to visit you today? The tone was mocking. Evan was Amy's childhood friend, a playboy who excelled in whining and dining during regular days. He didn't like Jackson, and the feeling was mutual. Their families interacted often, with his father belittling Jackson numerous times, which made Evan even more intolerant of Jackson. He often scolded me for being too romantic, telling me to go dig wild vegetables in his garden. This time, he seemed to be here to make fun of me again. But did I care? Yeah. I thought about it, sent him the divorce agreement directly, and said, "I'm single starting today. Take me out to eat." He called immediately, starting off with, "Are you crazy? I'll go through with the divorce registration once I'm out of the hospital." Luckily, my injuries from the car accident weren't severe, just a bump on the head, a minor concussion. Isn't that worth some acknowledgement? Evan stayed quiet for a moment, then suddenly chuckled. "All right, Amy, what kind of acknowledgement do you want? Heard you opened a new bar." A week later, I changed into a strapless sparkly dress and glamorously left the hospital. Evan, smoking a cigarette, tossed a coat over to me. "Put this on. What's with this outfit in the hospital?" I rolled my eyes at him. "You don't understand, today's a special day." Evan ignored me, turned to leave, only to unexpectedly bump into Jackson. Jackson's gaze landed on the coat I was wearing on my shoulders, his eyes cold. "You're here." I walked over, flashed him a smile, and asked, "Where's the car?" Jackson's expression softened slightly. "In the parking lot." "Let's go." Evan spoke up, tilting his head and squinting at me. "Amy, you're not riding in my car?" I waved my hand. "Oh, I have to go with Jackson first to handle the divorce registration. It's more convenient to take his car." I urged Jackson, who suddenly froze up. "What are you standing there for? Let's go." Evan laughed. "Yeah, this is serious business. Don't delay." Jackson scoffed. "Amy, you can't wait to sever ties with me, can you? But you were the one who brought up the divorce, right?" I admitted honestly, "Mainly, I have other plans for the evening, and I thought it's better to resolve this early and not waste your time." Jackson had always been busy, rarely coming home. I knew he didn't want to see me, and I had no interest in continuing the entanglement either. It's better for everyone to go their separate ways happily. As we waited in line during the weekday with not many people around, it didn't take long for me and Jackson to be next. But just as we were about to enter, Jackson's phone suddenly rang. I glanced. It was Molly. Jackson stepped aside to answer, and I faintly heard him speaking calmly and patiently. "You're still outside. Is everything okay?" He had never spoken to Amy with such a tone. This marriage had been a forced situation from the start, 5 years of constant friction and difficulty even in sharing a meal together. How come he's now showing such care and tenderness? The staff reminded us, "Are you still going to proceed?" I shook my head, feeling a bit sorry for the original owner. She seemed to hold no place in Jackson's heart. "Jackson," I called out, "let's process my documents first this time, okay?" Jackson, always putting Molly first, remained indifferent to my tears and pleas. The original owner must have been foolish to think she could compete with Molly. And Jackson, he could be open and honest about us now and be with his true love soon. Jackson's expression froze as he spoke on the phone. "Let the doctor check you first, I'll be there soon." 20 minutes later, holding the divorce certificate, tears welled up in my eyes. From now on, shopping, traveling, drinking, I'll live a happy life. I sincerely said to Jackson, "Thank you, Jackson. Goodbye. Thank you for your money, and never see you again." Walking out, I saw Evan. He drove a flashy red Ferrari, impossible to miss. I happily walked over, feeling rich. I wanted to splurge. Then, I heard Jackson's somewhat hesitant voice behind me, "Amy." I quickly turned back. "Anything else?" Jackson looked troubled, his emotions unclear. If it had been the original owner, she would have pried and questioned him with what's wrong, but I was done pretending. "No, just go," I quickened my pace. As a supporting role like me, the real happiness lies in staying away from the lead characters as soon as possible. Sitting in Evan's car as we drove away, I glanced at the rearview mirror. Jackson stood there, surrounded by people, yet looking unexpectedly lonely. Now that I'm no longer a bother, he's finally free, right? Evan glanced at me, regretful. I have money now, I said cheerfully, ready to spend. Evan was exasperated. I thought you loved him so much before, but now, you seem delighted after the divorce. Isn't it obvious? I replied, looking at my face in the mirror at 28, with a few more wrinkles. I was still pretty and most importantly, wealthy. He didn't love me, so I stopped loving him, I explained as we waited at a red light. Evan turned to me, studying me for a while before speaking. You've changed after the accident. My heart skipped a beat, and I remained quiet for a moment, shrugging. Maybe a near-death experience changes a person. Evan looked puzzled, then smiled. Maybe it does. Alright, I'll foot the bill for your spending tonight. 2 hours later, Evan regretted his offer. He frowned. Had enough yet? He was referring not to alcohol but to the young men at the bar. I raised my glass to him. Come, join me for a drink. I patted his shoulder and pointed to the charming guys around us. Look at them, sweet and handsome. Aren't they all better than my ex-husband? Evan chuckled. Are you finally seeing clearly? A slim and handsome young man came over to pour me a drink, politely asking, would you like to try this? Yes, please. I responded eagerly, but Evan snatched the glass away. No mixing drinks for you. You just got out of the hospital, and I don't want to call an ambulance later, he scolded, giving the young man a warning look. The young man apologized quickly. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's okay, it's okay. I'm happy today. I waved it off. Then, I teased Evan, you know, when your girlfriends feed you drinks, you enjoy. But when it's me, you're suddenly cautious. Evan chuckled. Not quite the same, is it? I exclaimed, why not? I'm a newly rich woman, and I can do whatever I want. Suddenly, Evan asked, do your family know about this? I froze for a moment. Before I could answer, Evan seemed to understand. I knew you wouldn't dare to tell them. Not that you didn't want to, but you couldn't. The original owner and her family didn't have a good relationship, with her parents being traditional and favoring her brother over her. She had rebelled against them, especially when marrying Jackson. Later, when Jackson succeeded, her family's attitude changed drastically but still criticized her for the conflicts with Jackson. In any case, this divorce certificate in my hand, what do I have to fear? The days that followed were even happier than I had imagined. I had all of Jackson's things packed and sent away. The villa, originally a wedding gift from her parents, was not where Jackson wanted to stay overnight anyway. Maybe every corner here reminds him of the humiliation Amy once brought to him. At first, he mostly lived at the company, but as his career took off, he bought an apartment near the company. The previous owner had visited once and coincidentally saw Molly there. Even though Molly quickly explained that she was just seeking shelter from the rain, given Amy's temper, how could she not be angry? They had a big fight that time and didn't talk to each other for a month, but Amy couldn't stand it and eventually compromised. After all, her heart and eyes were only for Jackson. Now, in this luxurious 3-story villa, it's all mine. Jackson doesn't have much here, but even after clearing it out, I still feel a bit empty. So, I immediately headed out for some shopping. Soon I was shopping in my favorite stores. This one, not this one, pack up the rest for me. Okay, Amy. The store manager was all smiles. She was happy, and I was happy too. A few salespeople followed me, carrying my stuff. But as soon as we stepped out, we ran into Jackson. When he saw me, he was stunned. And I had already seen Molly following behind him. It seemed that her leg injury had improved enough for her to come window shopping at the mall. Jackson's lips moved and he actually took the initiative to speak. Her mother's birthday is coming up, so I brought her here to pick a gift. I blinked. Why was he telling me this? I didn't care. Out of politeness, I just nodded politely. But before I could even take a step to leave, Molly spoke up too. She seemed a bit apologetic. Amy, sorry, my leg is still not very convenient, so I let Jackson help me come here. I see you've bought a lot of stuff. Is it hard to carry? Shall I let Jackson give you a ride? I'll be fine on my own. By bringing Jackson to help me, she hinted not to be jealous and graciously passed him to me. I smiled and said, "No need, my car is downstairs. Besides, this is a personal matter, so I won't bother Jackson." Molly widened her eyes slightly. What? I was also surprised and looked at Jackson. Jackson, you haven't told Molly yet, we're divorced already, right? Molly looked at Jackson in shock. Jackson's jaw tensed, his face turning a bit ugly. I don't like to flaunt personal matters, haven't I thrown a few divorce parties? Why are you so petty? Molly also seemed surprised to receive such a bombshell, opened her mouth. Jackson, you and Amy are all ready. Why didn't you tell me? Hearing her voice, Jackson seemed to remember her presence, his brow furrowed, hesitated for a moment, then explained in a low voice, I've been really busy lately. In the past, he used this excuse most often on Amy, never thought the tables would turn, and Molly would also be treated this way. But a main character and a supporting role are different after all. For Molly, this phrase means a huge piece of good news. She glanced back and forth between me and Jackson, stuck out her tongue apologetically. Sorry, I didn't know before, I didn't mean to bring it up. Amy, you don't mind, right? Of course, I don't mind, it's just an irrelevant man. Well then, you two carry on shopping, my salesperson will carry my things, which are pretty heavy, so I'll head off now. As I took a step, Jackson suddenly said, Wait, I turned back. Jackson, what else? Jackson frowned, still not used to my sudden change in attitude towards him. Mom said you hadn't visited her in a while. Jackson's voice lowered, seeming reluctant, but had to say, if you have time, go see her. He was talking about his mother who had kidney disease. Unlike Jackson, his mother had always liked Amy. Because Jackson never told her that he was forced to marry Amy. In the old lady's heart, Amy, the rich girl, didn't mind Jackson's family conditions and was devoted to him, so she naturally liked Amy. In the beginning of their marriage, to please Jackson, Amy had always taken care of his mother proactively to win her favor. She knew this was her last card. Jackson was filial, even if just for this reason, he wouldn't easily fall out with her. But by laying hands on Molly, troubling on his bottom line, Amy lost this last trump card. After thinking for a moment, I agreed. All right, tomorrow then. Jackson looked relieved, naturally added, I'll come pick you up tomorrow morning. I smiled at him, dangled the car keys. No need, I'm capable, I can drive myself easily, so I won't trouble you. Both Jackson and Molly's expressions froze. Early the next morning, I set off for the nursing home. This high-end nursing home was located in the suburbs, well-equipped, with good service, and of course, very expensive. Amy, you're here. The caregiver greeted me politely, knowing I didn't get along well with Jackson and thus was quite distant with me. How can you call me that again? Jackson's mother was lying in bed, long-term kidney disease had made her skinny. Physically weak, but in recent years in the nursing home, she had improved quite a bit compared to before. The caregiver apologized in a low voice, glanced briefly at the food box in my hand, sneered, with a bit of disdain. Not even a caregiver looked favorably on my act of kindness because she knew that no matter what I did, it would only stir Jackson's disgust. Amy. Jackson's mother saw me and smiled kindly, saying, It's been a while since I last saw you. I sighed inwardly. Amy had only been using her from start to finish, but she took it to heart. The old lady didn't do anything wrong. A little bit. I brought you some chicken soup, try it later. But she held my hand, looked at me for a long while, and asked gently, Is Jackson's child making you angry again? I shook my head, but she didn't believe. She sighed helplessly. Jackson has been stubborn since he was a child, and he always keeps things to himself. If he upsets you, tell Mom, and she'll talk to him for you. I felt even more guilty. I had planned to tell her about the divorce, but now I couldn't bring myself to say it. I had dinner with her and talked for a while. Before leaving, I hesitated for a long time, and finally said, I'll be busy for a while, so I might not be able to come visit you as often. It's better to gradually reduce the frequency and find a suitable time to tell her. It should be much better. We can't keep hiding this forever. I'm willing to bet that Jackson wouldn't agree either. If I visit too often, he might think I still have feelings for him. Jackson's mother patted my hand and sighed lightly. Amy, you're a good child. The thing before, it was Jackson's fault, even though he never brought it up to me. I know he feels guilty and regrets it deeply. He loves you so much, losing the child must have been hard for him. The child. Yes, this is the straw that broke the camel's back in Amy and Jackson's relationship. Yes, Amy actually had a child before. She conceived the child when Jackson was drunk during some social event, using whatever means necessary. In Amy's eyes, this was the most powerful weapon to keep Jackson by her side. After finding out about the pregnancy, Jackson felt guilty towards his love, Molly, on one hand, and couldn't let go of his own bloodline on the other. In the end, he chose the child. Having had a difficult childhood himself, he couldn't bear the thought of his child being born into a broken family. During that time, he and Amy's relationship was at its best. He would buy nutritional supplements for Amy, and he even read a lot of parenting guides because he genuinely wanted to be a good father. That's why he exploded so much when he found out that Amy deliberately aborted the child. Feeling the change in Jackson's attitude after her pregnancy, Amy pushed the boundaries, wanting him by her side all the time. Every time Jackson tried to avoid her, she would pretend to feel unwell, forcing Jackson to compromise. After doing this several times, Jackson naturally saw through her tricks. Once, Amy called Jackson again, saying she had a stomach ache and asked him to come home quickly. However, that day Molly suddenly developed a high fever, and Jackson stayed with her at the hospital instead of going home. Amy, haven't you had enough of the boy who cried wolf story? His voice over the phone was calm, but it completely infuriated Amy. In a fit of anger, she went to the hospital and had the child aborted. She wanted Jackson to know that the wolf really would come. As expected, this incident caused their relationship to completely fall apart, turning their world upside down. If Jackson was disgusted by Amy before, now he also added hatred to the mix. He never entered their marital home again, and he had no contact with Amy. Until Amy went to find Molly and pushed her down the stairs. This was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Not to mention, the real owner went crazy, showing no mercy even to herself. I stayed silent for a moment and said, "It's all in the past." The old Amy had already died, and these things had come to an end. Coming out of the nursing home, I felt a little suddy, wasn't sure if it was for Amy's mother or for the old Amy. And then this bit of sadness reached its peak when I realized I had accidentally lost my car keys. The book said Amy was malicious and reckless, but it didn't mention she was also forgetful. I despaired and called Evan. "Pick me up, come quickly." Evan found it outrageous. "Am I your driver? Do I have to follow your orders at all times? I'll pay you, won't I?" I said. "This nursing home is quite remote, it's not easy to get a cab." So, Evan resignedly came, and by the time we got home, it was already dark. What's more, it started to rain heavily. Looking at the massive downpour outside, I felt generous and let Evan stay, giving him the guest room on the second floor to sleep in. Unexpectedly, early the next morning, someone rang the doorbell. I went to open the door half awake. "Who's there? Why are you here?" Standing at the door, of all people, was Jackson. He was about to say something when footsteps came from the stairs, and Evan's voice, clearly annoyed at being woken up, was heard. "Who's there?" Jackson's face immediately darkened, and each word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. "Looks like I came at a bad time, disturbing you all." Rolling my eyes, I thought to myself, "Do you even realize you disrupted everyone's sleep? What's more, why are you giving me that attitude? This is my house, after all. You're just an ex-husband, what right do you have to be angry? I've been forgiving you for so long." I turned to Evan and said, "It's nothing, you can go back to sleep." Evan, with his temperamental personality, was obviously annoyed. He only stayed behind because of the heavy rain, and I couldn't even guarantee him a good night's sleep. Seeing Jackson, Evan seemed to sober up a bit, and lazily smiled. "Oh, they have a guest. It would be rude of me to go back to sleep now, Amy. Why don't you invite him in?" And I say, a man will go mad if he didn't sleep well. I ignored him and looked back at Jackson. I had no intention of letting him in after I had already cleaned up his stuff. I didn't want to mess up the house again and then trouble the housekeeper to clean it. "So early, did you come over for something?" I asked. Jackson's face turned slightly red, clearly affected by Evan's few words. In the past, he could have just kicked Evan out with authority, but now he was stuck outside the front gate, worse off than Evan. But these kinds of men were good at enduring, Jackson included. He took a deep breath, didn't look at Evan again, and took a key out of his pocket, handing it over. "You left this at Mom's yesterday, and she pushed me to bring it to you." In other words, he came over purely because of his mother's insistence. "Thank you. I took the key, although there was no need for you to make the trip." "I have a spare key." Jackson was silent for a moment. I waited for a few seconds, getting impatient, and gently reminded him, "Jackson, do you have something else to say?" Jackson would not have reached his current status if he couldn't understand the meaning of this rushed visit. He pursed his lips in agreement. I closed the door directly. Evan stood on the stairs watching me. I asked, "Aren't you going back to get some sleep?" "Why are you staring at me?" Evan squinted slightly, arms crossed. He casually remarked, "I just feel like you're a bit ruthless towards your ex-husband." I was speechless and replied, "If you have nothing to say, you don't have to say it." Evan raised his chin and said, "Amy, don't tell me you can't see through his intentions." I questioned, "What intentions?" Evan leaned back lazily and said, "He wants to see you, doesn't he? Otherwise, he wouldn't have come over so early in the morning just to specially deliver a set of car keys, and he wouldn't have looked so displeased upon seeing Evan show up in this house." I tilted my head and asked, "And then?" Evan casually tapped the railing with his fingers and said, seemingly offhandedly, "You don't feel anything at all?" I retorted, "What feeling? Am I supposed to run up to him just because he turned around once he saw me? I find it a bit funny." "But you should." Evan looked over, his eyes flickering slightly, and his back seemed to straighten a bit. I shrugged and said, "Feelings, filed for divorce too late. If I had known what kind of person he was, I should have given up on him sooner. Such a waste of my time." Evan seemed surprised by what I said, looked at me for a moment, and suddenly chuckled. "Well, Amy, you finally got it together." I was encouraged and couldn't help but praise him back, saying, "Not at all, I still have a long way to go compared to you." "How many times do I have to say it? I have nothing to do with those women." I quickly responded, I know, the master just plays around with them, waiting to meet your true soulmate. The playboy will eventually encounter his destined true love and repay the emotional debt he owes with interest." Evan looked at me speechlessly, muttered something about not being able to reason with me, and went back to bed. I slept until the afternoon and was woken up by hunger. Wake up, I found myself staring at the sumptuous food on the table and Evan leisurely enjoying the meal. "Evan, do you have no conscience? You're eating alone." Evan raised an eyebrow. "Should I starve myself for you?" Very persuasive, can't argue with that. Evan is truly a gourmet. The private dishes he orders taste better than what others order. "Oh, your parents called me. They said they have something to tell you but you haven't been picking up," Evan suddenly mentioned. I nodded while picking up a piece of stewed ribs. "I know." Evan paused his chopsticks, glanced at my phone, and suggested, "Do you want me to leave?" I waved my hand, "No need. Let them say what they have to say, the deed is done, and they can't do anything to me." Just then, the phone rang again. I answered. Before I could speak, a shrill voice erupted from the other end. "Amy. You need to go find Jackson right now, say you were wrong. You were just impulsive. Beg him to remarry you." I listened to the sharp female voice and moved the phone a bit further away. Remarry? She really dared to think that. Getting scolded or ending up in Jackson's hands, I know which is more serious. "Amy? Amy. Are you even listening to me?" I finally found a gap to reply, "I'm listening, but this is quite a difficult situation, and I can't handle it. The other person got even angrier. Amy. Is this how you should treat your parents? I wondered, didn't you say earlier that you don't have a daughter like me? Did you forget? The other person was suddenly speechless. She seemed like she wanted to scold me again, but I was too lazy to listen. I've made it clear, I'm busy, we'll talk another day. I hung up, blocked the number directly. Witnessing this series of operations, Evan, who was quite amused, put down his chopsticks, looked at me from all angles for a while, and said in astonishment, "Not bad, Amy, not only did you dump your ex-husband, but you also dared to stand up to your parents." I replied with a mouthful of food, trying to placate him. Where there is oppression, there is resistance. Evan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. So, does that mean it might be my turn one day? I gave him a thumbs up, praising his self-awareness. He wasn't surprised by my actions. Growing up with the original Amy, he knew exactly what kind of temperament she had. From his perspective, what I was doing now probably could be summed up in one sentence: I was going crazy. But then again, anyone who got caught up in this mess would go crazy, right? By the way, help me look for a new house, I said. This one is fine too, but it's always bothered by people, quite annoying. Not just Jackson, but also the whole original family. They are all troublemakers today. I completely fell out with them. Who knows if they will come knocking on my door. I'm not interested in dealing with them. Evan understood. Okay, leave it to me. Evan truly lived up to being a qualified rich second generation. Although he spent most of his time eating, drinking, and having fun, when he was needed, he was reliable. The next day, he called me to say he had found a villa in the western part of the city. The previous owner of the house had gone abroad and was eager to sell. The house had just been renovated and was brand new. A real bargain for you. I was very satisfied with his efficiency, and that day I took Evan to sign the contract with the homeowner and completed the transfer as quickly as possible. Then I turned around and put a for sale sign on the previous house. I called a moving company, and a group of workers were busy going up and down the stairs. Watching them work made me want to facepalm. I hadn't realized how much stuff the previous owner had until now. Shouldn't they pay someone to deal with all these things? Amy, what's in this box? It's quite heavy. A worker carried a large cardboard box from the third floor. The box was tightly sealed, and I couldn't tell what was inside. I was about to go take a look when I received a phone call. Hello, is this Amy? This is Third Hospital. Your husband collapsed on the road and was brought to the hospital. Can you come over quickly? I was stunned. Jackson collapsed and was taken to the hospital? You must have the wrong person. I am not his wife. I explained. The voice on the other end sounded surprised, but the patient's phone has your name as his emergency contact. I hadn't realized he hadn't updated his contact information since we got divorced. How is he doing? The patient likely fainted due to low blood sugar, not life-threatening, but he's not in great shape overall. Would you consider coming by? I acknowledged, but I'm a bit busy now. How about you call his current girlfriend, Molly? Her number should be in the contact list. If there's anything else, just contact her directly. After hanging up, I saw more boxes in the living room. How long will it take to sort all this out? Just have them move everything first. I'll organize them when I have time. Fortunately, the new house is spacious. I asked the housekeeper to roughly arrange the belongings and then went for a spa session and tried out a popular new Korean barbecue place. The food was delicious, and the decor was impressive. I couldn't resist taking several photos and posting them online. Today is also a day to give up on dieting. I even posted a beautiful selfie because I did a full face of makeup. Friends liked the post, and even Evan commented, "This place is good." I replied, "Have you been there?" Evan said, "Of course, I'm the owner." However, to my surprise, Molly also left a comment. It was polite on the surface but carried a tone of questioning and pressure. "Amy, even though you're divorced from Jackson, he's lying in the hospital now, and you won't even come to see him. Is that appropriate?" Only a few people knew about my divorce from Jackson, and I hadn't figured out how to announce it yet. But there she was, already taking the moral high ground. I responded slyly, a qualified ex should be treated as if they were dead, right? I was just worried you'd get the wrong idea. If you don't mind, I'll go see him. After all, we were classmates, and visiting him is the right thing to do, isn't it? Soon after, Molly deleted her comment. Can deleting it make everything go away? I immediately posted another question publicly. What's an appropriate gift to bring when visiting an ex-husband and his current girlfriend? This is really important to me. An hour later, I took some fruit and went to the hospital. As soon as I arrived at the ward, I heard Molly sobbing, "Jackson, don't be angry, I know I was wrong this time, but I did it for you." Jackson didn't respond. Molly's voice trembled even more. "You passed out, and the hospital specifically called her, yet she wouldn't even look at you. What if something happened to you today?" Finally, Jackson's tired voice came, "I'm a bit tired and just want to be alone." After a moment, I heard the sound of a chair moving, and Molly appeared at the door. As she opened the door, she saw me and froze in shock. Jackson noticed the change and turned to look as well. His face was pale, devoid of the usual commanding presence. He lay on the hospital bed with an 4 drip, showing an unusual sign of weakness. When he saw me, his eyes briefly brightened, seeming nervous and uncertain. "Amy, what are you doing here?" I walked in, passing by Molly. I didn't want people to talk behind my back, saying I didn't care about my ex-husband after the divorce. We were college classmates, so there's no need to make things so tense, right? Jackson's face turned pale, and his lips tightened. He must have seen the conversation between me and Molly online. How could a proud person like him tolerate being publicly mocked? He likely harbored even more resentment towards me now. I felt annoyed. "Well, I'm here now. If there's nothing else, I'll leave." Jackson's lips twitched. "Amy, do you have to be like this?" I raised an eyebrow, asking sincerely, "Be like what?" "You visited me 3 days after I had an accident. Wouldn't you say I've been considerate enough compared to you?" Jackson's face instantly turned ashen. He opened his mouth as if to say something. My phone suddenly rang. It was the housekeeper calling. "Amy, most of your stuff has been sorted out, but there's one box left. It seems to contain some ceramics, and it looks like you made them yourself. What do you suggest we do with them?" I was taken aback. "Ceramics?" "Right. And it seems like you made them yourself. So I thought I'd ask you." Caught off guard by Jackson's equally stunned expression, a flash of realization hit me. I remembered that these ceramics were indeed handmade by the previous owner. In college, Jackson worked at a DIY pottery shop. Amy, infatuated with him, would visit frequently, messy with clay after attempting to make something, a poorly crafted piece she'd take away in the end. She enjoyed it, not caring how embarrassing it looked. Eventually, Jackson couldn't stand it and told her what she did was wrong. Amy immediately took the opportunity to challenge him. "Then teach me yourself." Jackson was not willing, but Amy was generous and a VIP customer at the store, so he couldn't offend her. It wasn't until later when Jackson resigned that Amy stopped. That box of art pieces was collected like this. "It's not anything important, just throw it away." "I don't care," I said indifferently. "Wait," Jackson suddenly spoke, "you're moving?" This man's IQ is occasionally on point. Jackson furrowed his brows, asking, "Where are you moving to?" "Why so suddenly?" I couldn't help but chuckle. "Jackson, how many times do I have to remind you, we are already divorced? What I do and where I live has nothing to do with you." Jackson suddenly choked up, as if he heard something he couldn't accept, clenching his fists tightly, veins popping out. After a while, he seemed to finally compromise, saying softly, "If you don't want those ceramics, I can have someone pick them up." I looked at him strangely. "Those are mine to begin with. I'll keep them if I want, and throw them away if I want." I don't know why this sentence hit Jackson's sore spot, the last glimmer in his eyes suddenly dissipating. Like a weak flame in the wind, finally blown out. Molly walked over worriedly. "Jackson, are you okay?" Jackson slightly turned his head, avoiding her hand. Molly froze in place, feeling awkward. But I had zero interest in this drama, so I turned around to leave unexpectedly. Just as I stepped out, I was stopped by a doctor. I looked up and saw a woman in her 40s examining me. Then, she seemed to recognize me, smiling and asking, "Feeling unwell recently? Here for a checkup?" I was a bit confused. Then I noticed her name tag, Chief Obstetrician and Gynecologist. A guess formed in my mind. The only thing Amy had in common with her must have been the incident with the child before. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm fine. I'm here to visit a friend today," I replied vaguely. She seemed relieved. "That's good. Your body is inherently weak, and the miscarriage last time had a significant impact on you. You need to be extra careful now." Glancing around, she asked, "Is your partner not with you this time?" I was stunned. These two short sentences contained so much information. Miscarriage. Miscarriage? Didn't Amy intentionally abort herself out of jealousy? How did it become a miscarriage due to emergencies? And about the partner, right? It seemed that Evan was the first to arrive at the hospital that time. "What are you doing?" Just when I was bewildered, Molly's exclamation came from behind me. I turned around to see Jackson pulling out the needle himself, pushing Molly aside and striding over. He stared at the female doctor intently, his voice unusually tense. "What did you just say?" She is?" The doctor was also confused by this scene. "Who are you?" Jackson pursed his lips, seemingly unsure how to answer that question. I quickly explained, "My ex-husband. The person who came with me to the hospital earlier was my friend, not my partner." The doctor's brows furrowed, seemingly incredulous. "So, that child is yours? Your wife had vaginal bleeding in the early stages of pregnancy, had a miscarriage due to fetal arrest, and you had no idea at all?" I can't remember how I got home. Because I was completely shocked by this sudden news in the study, I sat for a while, unable to help but lower my head and touch my flat belly. How could this be? The book clearly wrote that Amy deliberately aborted the child out of jealousy. How did it turn into a miscarriage due to fetal arrest? I don't know why, but thinking of this, a part of my body seemed to ache along with it. It's as if I could vividly feel her lying on the cold operating table at that moment, that despair and pain. This made me even more uncomfortable. I shook my head, trying to shake off these emotions. The study had just been tidied up, so I rummaged through and found a box specifically for storing university stuff, eventually pulling out a college yearbook at the bottom. If the miscarriage incident had deviated from the novel, could there be differences in other areas too? I flipped open the first page, finding a photo. The sunshine was bright, a girl with a radiant smile, and a tall figure stood behind her on the podium. Although a bit far, anyone with keen eyes could tell at a glance, it was Jackson from university. A few lines below, I got sunstroke on the first day of school, and a passing male student carried me to the medical room and gave me a bottle of water. Unfortunately, he left soon, and I didn't know how to thank him. Today, a classmate told me, it turns out the one standing on the podium was him. So his name is Jackson. A young girl took a selfie under a disguise of liking someone, a straightforward operation. Was this when she first started liking Jackson? I wanted to laugh a bit. Amy liked Jackson because of such a simple reason. I couldn't help but touch my face. The selfish, extreme, and paranoid Amy in the book seemed somewhat different from the vibrant and smiling girl in the photos. It's hard to imagine how the girl with stars in her eyes would eventually become someone who liked tormenting others recklessly. I continued to flip through and, to my surprise, every photo was somehow related to Jackson. Him lecturing in the lecture hall, wiping sweat off at the basketball court, eating alone in the cafeteria, and working earnestly at the pottery shop, occasionally with brief captions written beside these photos. His chosen courses are so boring, he can't understand them. How can someone be so good at studying and basketball at the same time? He always seems to eat alone, and every time he eats the cheapest meal in the canteen. Is he really full? He always looks so busy, never even has time to talk to me. This is Amy's secret admiration for Jackson. Over the 4 years of college, she took many photos of him, accompanied by her murmurs. Every picture, every sentence, is completely different from the Amy in the book. It seems like he has someone he likes, but that person is not me. What should I do? Should I give up? Tomorrow is the graduation ceremony. Should I confess to him and say goodbye to this secret crush? While taking graduation photos, he suddenly left halfway. I secretly followed him and found out that his mother's condition worsened and requires a lot of money. What should he do? This page should have had graduation photos on it, but it's just blank. Because of Jackson, Amy also missed her own graduation photo. My hands trembled slightly. For some reason, I felt that this book was heavy, making it difficult for me to continue flipping through. As if something uncontrollable would happen if I kept reading. It felt like there was a stone pressing on my chest, unable to take a deep breath or exhale. Driven by some unknown force, I continued flipping through, only to see a wedding photo. No, to be precise, it was a passport photo. The photo on the marriage certificate. Amy still had a smile on her face, but it was more restrained than before, with a slight curl at the corner of her mouth, leaning on Jackson. Jackson, on the other hand, looked calm, totally out of place with the festive red background. I then remembered that the two of them seemed to not have a wedding photo. After a year of indecision, Jackson finally chose to marry Amy. He didn't marry the love of his life, so he had no interest in these trivial matters. Plus, his mother was still in the hospital at the time, so they didn't have a wedding ceremony, nor did they take bridal photos, they just got a marriage certificate. I thought this page, the day finally together with Jackson, Amy would write many words, but in fact, there were no words on this page. I stared at the photo for a long time, feeling a sense of blockage in my heart. After 5 years of secret admiration, 5 years of marriage, they only had this one photo together. I suppressed my thoughts and continued to flip through, only to find that there were no more photos of Jackson, only occasional words. He seems very busy lately, the company has just started, and everything falls on him, it's so exhausting. He bought an apartment near the company, saying it was for convenience, but that woman, why is she always there? I know I can't compare to her in his heart, but I still want to have a child with him. Is there no hope for me? Today, I went to the nursing home again, coincidentally catching Evan with his grandfather leaving the hospital. He said I was brainless, that a man like Jackson wasn't influenced by such tactics at all. I almost got into a fight with him at the nursing home because I knew he was telling the truth. I was about to give up, but when Jackson came back late at night, maybe the socializing didn't go well, he was so drunk. I couldn't help but kiss him, and he kissed me back for the first time. There's a blank space in between. Until a certain page, I seemed to be pregnant. I kept reading. Those 2 months were indeed the best time in Amy and Jackson's relationship. Even though she knew that Jackson's change was only because of the baby. But she had no other desires. For many, many years, she had been helplessly in love with this person. She once thought that he was the light in her life. She wanted to draw warmth and affection from him, but she was wrong from the beginning. And all these seemingly beautiful illusions were finally shattered mercilessly. On the last page, there was an ultrasound image. The paper was a bit wrinkled, and the small line of text below had blurred, as if it had been wet with water before. Baby, I'm sorry, Mom is useless. Like a thunderbolt suddenly striking down, a stinging sensation enveloped me, my whole body went numb, and my fingertips were icy. Countless images flashed back in my mind, crazily rushing, as if to swallow me whole. I felt like a dying fish right before a heavy rain, trying to surface to breathe, but being carried away by even bigger waves, unable to breathe, unable to move. I finally remembered, I didn't wear a mask. I am Amy. The phone suddenly rang, amidst the silence of the study. It was particularly piercing. I came to my senses, it was a call from Evan. I answered the call. Before I could speak, Evan directly asked, "Did you go see Jackson at the hospital today? He had a flight out this afternoon, so he shouldn't know what's going on here. Even though I posted those comments on social media, he shouldn't know so much, even the timing was clear." Yes. I didn't deny it. How did you know? He was quiet for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "Jackson called me, asked about some things related to you." It was a tactful way to put it, but I had a vague idea that Jackson must have asked him about the day I had a miscarriage. Well then. I nodded, not planning to inquire further. Listening to my calm tone, Evan seemed to realize that he had gone a bit overboard. It's late, you're not asleep yet? He softened his tone and changed the subject. I was about to say something when I heard the doorbell ring. The person who came was Jackson. I hung up on Evan, went downstairs to open the door, but didn't let him in. The sky outside had completely darkened, with streetlights casting a soft glow behind him, half shadowing his face. "What's up?" I asked. His lips were pale. I came to apologize. I really didn't know how serious your situation was that day," he stammered. Hours had passed since I left the hospital. Did he only just now remember to say these words? "It's okay," I said calmly, "it's all in the past." "It's too late," I continued, "I don't need this apology anymore." Jackson's face turned even paler. Amy, listen to my explanation." "I can explain." "I didn't mean to argue with you that day," he pleaded. "Was it Molly who didn't let you come back?" I asked. Jackson froze. After a moment, he closed his eyes and said slowly, "I thought you were lying to me again. I thought it wouldn't matter if I came back later if only I knew." "Your thoughts, are they always right?" Pain flickered in Jackson's eyes. "But, when I asked you later, why did you say that you intentionally had the child aborted?" I asked with a faint smile. "You believed me immediately, didn't you?" Jackson suddenly froze. In his subconscious, he had assumed that I would do such a thing, that I was a selfish woman willing to do anything. So without even confirming, he blamed everything on me. He struggled to speak. That day, you and Molly, did you really push her?" I looked at him quietly. This man was the one I had liked for 10 years. And at that moment, the biggest bias he gave me was doubting what Molly had said. I nodded. "I pushed her." "No." Jackson seemed to be suddenly stimulated. He shouted hoarsely, grabbing my wrist and staring into my eyes intensely, "You didn't push her. You didn't. Right?" My wrist hurt from his grip. I furrowed my brows, about to push him away, when a tall figure suddenly appeared behind me, pulling him away forcefully, then landing a heavy punch. Jackson stumbled back. I finally saw that the person who hit him was Evan, who was supposed to be on a business trip. Standing in front of me, he pointed at Jackson coldly. "Didn't I warn you not to touch her?" Blood seeped from Jackson's lips, and he looked at Evan with the same hostility in his eyes. Mockingly, he said, "What right do you have, an outsider, to meddle in our affairs?" Evan's forehead veins bulged, his face chillingly cold, as if he were about to strike again. I quickly stopped him. "Evan." He paused, turning his head to look at me, his gaze falling on my red, bruised wrist, his brow furrowed. He held my hand and checked it, reprimanding me gently. "Why are you so foolish? Don't you know how to avoid it or fight back?" My mind was in a whirl. I shook my head. "It's nothing, but what about you? Why are you back?" He clicked his tongue against his cheek, almost amused. "Not back, just to see if he's harassing you?" Jackson stared at Evan, grabbing my hand, his eyes faintly reddening. "Evan, don't make yourself sound so noble," he sneered. "You have your own dirty thoughts, you know it in your heart." Evan laughed. Turning back to Jackson, he looked down on him and said, "Since you see things so clearly, why don't you tell us, what exactly are my motives?" But Jackson refused to speak, clenching his lips. Evan sneered. "What's wrong, Jackson? Can't speak up? Let me. I've been waiting for you two to divorce, so I can pursue her. This chance doesn't come easy, of course I have to be cautious and seize it." The wind at night carried his voice, hitting my eardrums and chest with silent intensity. Evan continued, "You, Jackson, with eyes in your head and a conscience, you couldn't possibly have asked those questions just now. Do you really think someone will forgive you forever, always give you a chance?" Jackson's face turned ashen, swaying as if he might collapse at any moment. With a tremble in his voice, he said, I just wanted to clarify those things." Evan stepped forward quickly, grabbing Jackson's collar, his voice cold and steady. "I've told you." She had finally forgotten about those things and was ready to start a new life. "Did you really have to bring it up again?" I looked at Evan suddenly. His words sounded wrong to me. Had he noticed something already? But Evan didn't notice my reaction, just pushing Jackson away. Leave. Jackson nearly stumbled, his eyes losing focus, looking lost. I don't want to see you again. All you wanted to ask were those 2 questions just now. I've already answered them. Go, and don't come back, I said as I turned to leave. Suddenly, I heard a thud behind me. Jackson had actually kneeled down. Amy, his voice trembled uncontrollably. I know I was wrong, it's all my fault. Can you give me another chance, start over with me? Evan's first reaction was to turn to look at me, his usual indifferent air evaporated, only his narrow, dark eyes, fixed on me. His hand clenched into a fist at his side, back tensed. He was very nervous. Jackson was waiting for my answer, and so was he. I turned around, quietly looking at Jackson. Jackson, I just told you I pushed Molly, why did you react that way? He looked bewildered. I smiled. After we lost the baby, you stopped caring about me, so I blamed everything on Molly, harboring deep hatred towards her. So I called her, arranged a meeting, and when she wasn't paying attention, I pushed her down the stairs. Isn't this logical and fitting with your usual impression of me? Jackson shook his head. No. I continued, we've been married for 5 years, and I've always been selfish and willful, unlike Molly, who can charm you. I only bring trouble. I can't help you and I always want to possess you. I've been so immature. Isn't that what you think? Jackson's face turned even paler. I added softly, even this marriage itself was forced by me. If it weren't for your mother, you wouldn't have been with me, and we wouldn't have had so many entanglements. Isn't that how you view this marriage, Jackson? You said that to me before the accident, didn't you? Jackson looked extremely regretful, his eyes darting around. I was just being impulsive that day. I was just so angry. I didn't mean it. It was his words that made me fully understand how ridiculous and despicable I appeared in his eyes. After losing the baby, I became disheartened and started to doubt if my years of adoration for Jackson were worth it. That's why when Molly asked to meet me, I agreed. I also wanted to take the opportunity to have a clear conversation with this woman who had always interfered in my and Jackson's marriage, inside and out. But that day, before I could ask my question, Molly told me something. Amy, you don't really think that just by having a child you can keep Jackson's heart, do you? When you called, I was right next to him and I heard everything. I even advised him to go back and check on you. But do you know what he said? He said, you are just too much. You've liked Jackson since freshman year, right? It's because you fainted on your first day of school, and he took you to the infirmary? But you didn't know, he was just passing by and was called over by the instructor to help. Because of this, he even lost the water he bought for me. But I didn't blame him. Helping others is a good thing, right? Don't be silly, Amy. You always do this, and it annoys Jackson a lot. I didn't expect Molly to deliberately fall down the stairs, nor did I expect Jackson to show up at that exact moment. He didn't even bother to listen to my explanation. He just took Molly in his arms and rushed to the hospital. Molly sobbed softly in his embrace, tears soaking a big patch on his chest. He kept comforting her in a low voice, not sparing me a glance. Later, when he finally had time to spare, as I was about to explain, he shut me up with those words. Amy, how long are you going to keep this up? That day, I walked aimlessly on the street for a long time, his final accusations echoing in my mind. Am I selfish? Am I extreme? Am I despicable? Until that out-of-control car came crashing towards me, and I passed out on the spot. When I woke up again, I became a different version of myself, the one Jackson saw. He had created such an illusory world for me, where I was crazy, selfish, paranoid, and absurd. More importantly, instinctively, I no longer loved him. I stared into Jackson's eyes and calmly said, but Jackson, in this world, I no longer love you either. The next morning, I woke up to bright daylight. I followed the smell of breakfast to the kitchen, where Evan was cooking. I was surprised. Evan, what special occasion is it today that you're going all out for? Evan nodded towards the yard. The day for getting rid of a nuisance. Yesterday, Jackson knelt outside all night, and I didn't pay any attention. I dragged Evan, who still wanted to fight, back inside and went straight to rest after closing the door. Of course, in 2 separate rooms. I sat at the dining table and took a bite of his scrambled eggs on toast. It was also the first day Evan failed in the kitchen. Evan hurried over to snatch the toast. "Is it burnt?" "Don't eat it then. Let me make you a new one." I turned away. "No need, that's too wasteful." "It's still edible." Evan was half skeptical. "Really?" I held up the toast. "You wanna try?" As he was about to take a bite, I leaned forward and kissed him on the corner of his lips. He froze, his ears turning visibly red. "Amy." I patted his cheek satisfied. Gotcha. Why so loud?" "Louder than the confession you made yesterday." He hesitated for a moment, then leaned down to kiss me. "I thought you'd forgotten everything. When you woke up after the accident, you had forgotten so much, I almost thought I'd have to raise a little fool." I poked his chest. "How could I? Even if I forgot who I was, I wouldn't forget you." In a period when I no longer recognized or believed in myself, I still trusted someone without any defenses. He smiled contentedly. Finally a bit smart. With that, he ruffled my hair. "All those years of liking you weren't in vain." A jolt of something went through me, and I couldn't help but mutter softly, "Evan, how can you be even more blind than me, liking someone like me?" He chuckled. "It's actually because my taste is better, knowing to wait for someone worth waiting for, and I did." I laughed too. Epilogue. Lately, I keep running into this girl. She's in class, she's at the court when we play basketball, and she's even there when I'm working part-time. It feels like a coincidence, but her methods are too clumsy. She can't act, everything is written on her face. It's kind of annoying. I've been liked by other girls before, but none of them have been so bold and straightforward like her. She doesn't have an ounce of shyness that girls usually do. I thought she would give up after a while, but she turned out to be so stubborn. I purposely spent time with Molly, hoping she would give up, and I could see the sadness on her face, and she indeed didn't show up for a while. I let out a sigh of relief, but then I realized maybe someone like her just gets bored easily. After all, she's a rich girl, hasn't tasted the bitterness we have. Remembering what Molly said made me even more agitated, so I had to politely decline the hints of being together. I didn't have the time or energy for romance. I needed to take care of my parents and provide for the family. Luckily, Molly understood my situation and didn't bring it up again. Instead, she wholeheartedly helped me. But fate likes to throw surprises. My mother's condition worsened, requiring a hefty medical bill. Just when I thought I had reached a dead end, that girl showed up again. "What do you want?" I asked. She shook her head. I chuckled internally, not sure if it was directed at her or myself. "Let's be together," I heard myself say. I knew what she wanted, yet she still pretended. But I had no choice, I needed the money. Her relationship with her family wasn't good, so she kept sticking to me. But I was too busy, no time to pamper her. Gradually, she contacted me less, and I thought she had matured, only to find out she had been causing trouble with Molly. I warned her multiple times, but she never admitted it, always leaving with red eyes. Finally, she calmed down, and I felt relieved, only to see her chatting with another man at the nursing home. It was Evan. I knew him, her childhood friend, matching her in status. I, being a man, could read his intentions towards her. She never bickered with me like she did with him. How could she do this? Saying she likes me yet being with another man? She probably thought I was drunk that day, but I realized I wasn't. I don't know where that possessiveness came from, even I didn't anticipate it. When I found out she was pregnant, I strangely relaxed. Having a child meant we had to be together, right? But I never expected her to have an abortion. Did she want to draw a clear line with me, to escape from me? Everything fell apart, slipping out of control. I don't know how those words came out of my mouth. I might have gone insane. When she signed her name on the divorce agreement, I finally realized, I had truly gone mad. How could I let her go? I couldn't let her go. But by the time I came to my senses, it was too late. I fired Molly, leaked the information about her taking kickbacks and selling company secrets, making her unable to survive in the industry. She begged outside my door for days and eventually left the city, disappearing without a trace. I couldn't bring myself to change her contact name in my phone, but one day, when I drunkenly dialed, I found out it was a disconnected number. Later, I heard she and Evan had a grand wedding. I finally understood one thing: I had completely lost her. It was pouring rain outside, the dampness seeping into my heart. It's me, I'm the one at fault. I'm the one who lost her. I'm sorry. Please, let's not meet again next time.